December 2nd, 1941. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Late afternoon sun. Takeo Yoshikawa sits on a hillside above Pearl Harbor, binoculars raised. He's dressed casually, aloha shirt, slacks, looking like any other tourist enjoying the view. Below him, the entire Pacific Fleet spreads across the harbor. 8 battleships moored in pairs along Ford Island, aircraft carriers at their berths, dozens of destroyers and cruisers. He's not a tourist. He's Imperial Japanese Navy Ensign Takeo Yoshikawa, intelligence officer, sent to Hawaii 8 months ago under diplomatic cover as Tadashi Morimura, and he's counting ships for the last time before the attack he knows is coming. Yoshikawa operates completely legally. No breaking into offices, no stealing documents, no secret meetings with agents. He simply watches. Binoculars from public hillsides, observation from tourist boats that circle the harbor for 50 cents, counting planes at airfields visible from public roads. Everything he learns comes from information any civilian could obtain. American counterintelligence knows Japanese diplomats are in Hawaii. They monitor the consulate. They intercept communications. But they never identify Yoshikawa as a spy because he doesn't behave like one. He's just a junior diplomat who enjoys sightseeing. In 5 days, 353 Japanese aircraft will attack Pearl Harbor. They will know exactly where every ship is moored, exactly how many aircraft sit at each airfield, exactly when patrol planes change shifts, exactly which ships are in harbor on Sunday mornings. They will know this because Takeo Yoshikawa told them. His reports, transmitted through the Japanese consulate to Tokyo, provided the intelligence foundation for the attack. Admirals Yamamoto and Nagumo planned the operation using Yoshikawa's observations. Pilots received target photographs and diagrams based on his surveillance. Subscribe to see how one man collected the intelligence for history's most devastating surprise attack using nothing but binoculars and a tourist boat ticket. December 2nd, 1941. Yoshikawa lowers his binoculars. 8 battleships in harbor. On Sunday, December 7th, they'll still be there. He's made certain of it. He walks back to his car, another successful day of intelligence gathering complete. The Americans watching him, if they're watching at all, see a bored diplomat taking photographs like every other tourist in Hawaii. They don't see the spy who's about to help kill 2,403 Americans. Because Yoshikawa's greatest cover isn't deception, it's banality. March 1941. Takeo Yoshikawa arrives in Honolulu aboard the passenger liner Nita Maru. He's 29 years old, traveling under the name Tadashi Morimura, listed as a junior consular official at the Japanese Consulate General. The cover identity is thin but functional. Morimura is supposedly a low-ranking bureaucrat handling visa applications and commercial paperwork. His real assignment: conduct comprehensive intelligence reconnaissance of the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. Yoshikawa had been selected because of unique qualifications. He graduated from the Imperial Japanese Naval Academy at Etajima in 1933, trained as a naval aviator, but was forced to leave flight training due to stomach ailments. Rather than leaving service, he was recruited into naval intelligence. For 3 years before Hawaii, Yoshikawa studied every available document about Pearl Harbor. He memorized ship classes, studied aerial photographs, learned harbor layouts, analyzed American naval procedures. He knew the Pacific Fleet's organization better than most American officers stationed there. But Tokyo wanted current intelligence. Photographs were months old. Reports from merchant sailors were incomplete. Japan needed someone on the ground, watching the fleet daily, reporting patterns that would enable a successful surprise attack. The Morimura cover gave him diplomatic immunity and legitimate reason to be in Hawaii. As a consular official, he couldn't be arrested for espionage unless caught stealing classified materials or bribing informants. Since he planned to do neither, he would remain untouchable. Yoshikawa's instructions were simple. Observe the Pacific Fleet and report everything. Ship movements, aircraft deployments, security procedures, patrol patterns, which ships were in harbor which days. No risks, no illegal activities, just watch and report. He established his observation routine immediately. Every morning, Yoshikawa would leave the consulate and drive through Honolulu, ostensibly running errands. He'd stop at vantage points overlooking Pearl Harbor, pull out binoculars, and count ships. The hillside above Aya became a favorite spot. From there, he could see the entire harbor layout. He discovered that tourist boats offered harbor tours for 50 cents. These boats circled Pearl Harbor, passing close to Battleship Row, providing excellent views of moored vessels. Yoshikawa rowed these boats repeatedly, sometimes multiple times per week, always with binoculars, always counting and observing. Tour operators thought he was just another tourist fascinated by big warships. He visited beaches near military airfields, watching planes take off and land, counting aircraft types. He drove past Hickam Field, Wheeler Field, and Kaneohe Naval Air Station, observing from public roads. He ate lunch at restaurants with views of military installations, sitting for hours while watching activity. All completely legal. Hawaii in 1941 had minimal security restrictions. Military bases had fences and guards, but observation from public areas was unrestricted. Photography from public roads was allowed. Even harbor tour boats operated with no restrictions despite circling past the Pacific Fleet's primary anchorage. American counterintelligence was aware of the Japanese consulate and monitored its activities. FBI agents watched the building, intercepted some communications, tracked some staff members. But consular officials had diplomatic immunity, and surveillance resources were limited. The FBI couldn't follow every consulate employee every day. More importantly, American counterintelligence was looking for traditional espionage, contacts with agents, dead drops, payments to informants, attempts to recruit military personnel. They weren't particularly concerned about someone taking tourist boat rides and eating lunch with binoculars. Yoshikawa's first reports to Tokyo were transmitted through the consulate's diplomatic cables. Consul General Nagao Kita, aware of Yoshikawa's real mission, ensured these messages were sent through secure channels. The reports were detailed. Exact ship positions, mooring configurations, which battleships were paired together along Ford Island, how many destroyers were in the repair basin. Tokyo responded with specific questions. What time do patrol planes take off? How many aircraft are at each field? Are torpedo nets deployed around battleships? When do ships enter and leave harbor? Do ships move on weekends? Yoshikawa answered everything. He discovered the Pacific Fleet followed predictable patterns. Ships returned to Pearl Harbor on Friday afternoons and remained through the weekend. Security patrols were reduced on Sundays. Torpedo nets, which could protect ships from aerial torpedoes, were not deployed around battleships because they interfered with small boat traffic. By summer 1941, Yoshikawa had established such detailed knowledge of Pacific Fleet operations that he could predict ship locations days in advance. If a carrier departed Monday, it would return Friday. If battleships conducted gunnery exercises Tuesday through Thursday, they'd be in harbor over the weekend. The patterns were consistent. He also identified vulnerabilities. Airfields parked aircraft wingtip to wingtip to prevent sabotage, making them perfect targets for air attack. Anti-aircraft gun crews weren't at full readiness in harbor. Ammunition wasn't stored ready use. The fleet treated Pearl Harbor as sanctuary, not potential combat zone. Yoshikawa worked without assistants or agents. He never recruited informants, never bribed military personnel, never stole documents. He simply watched and reported what he saw. His entire intelligence operation consisted of one man with binoculars observing from public locations. American intelligence never identified him. FBI surveillance of the consulate noted a junior official named Morimura, who seemed to enjoy sightseeing, but this wasn't considered suspicious. Lots of people in Hawaii enjoyed harbor views and military watching. By November 1941, with war approaching, Yoshikawa's reporting intensified. Takeo wanted daily updates on fleet composition. His cables became more frequent, sometimes multiple reports per day. December 1941. War is imminent. Yoshikawa knows it. American commanders in Hawaii suspect it. But neither side fully grasps how close the moment has come. Throughout November, Takeo's requests became more urgent and specific. A November 15th cable asked Yoshikawa to divide Pearl Harbor into 5 areas and report ship locations by area, the kind of detailed targeting information needed for attack planning. A November 29th message requested reports on whether barrage balloons were deployed and if torpedo nets protected battleships. Yoshikawa answered everything. No barrage balloons, no torpedo nets. Battleships moored in pairs along Ford Island. Carriers usually absent on weekdays but in harbor on weekends. Aircraft parked close together at all fields. On December 2nd, Yoshikawa made his final comprehensive survey. He visited every vantage point, the hillside above Aiea, the tourist boat harbor tour, restaurants overlooking Hickam Field. He counted everything. 8 battleships present: Arizona, California, Maryland, Nevada, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, West Virginia. The carriers Enterprise and Lexington were at sea. Saratoga was in San Diego for repairs. That evening, Yoshikawa composed his final detailed report. The cable, transmitted December 2nd, provided exact ship positions and movement patterns. It noted that the fleet would likely be in harbor over the coming weekend, as that had been the consistent pattern. This was the intelligence the Kido Butai, Japanese carrier strike force, needed. The fleet had departed Japan on November 26th, sailing east across the North Pacific toward Hawaii. But Admiral Nagumo needed confirmation that targets would be in harbor when his aircraft arrived. Yoshikawa's December 2nd report provided that confirmation. On December 6th, Yoshikawa conducted his final reconnaissance. He took the tourist boat one last time, circling the harbor, counting the ships that would be attacked in less than 24 hours. 8 battleships still moored in pairs. No carriers. Enterprise was returning from Wake Island, but wouldn't arrive until December 8th. That evening, Yoshikawa transmitted his final message. It confirmed 9 battleships in harbor. Pennsylvania was in dry dock. No carriers. Normal Sunday routine expected. The message ended with information about wind direction and weather conditions, details pilots would need for attack runs. At the Japanese consulate, staff began preparing for war. They gathered codebooks and classified materials for destruction. Consul General Kita told Yoshikawa to prepare to be detained once hostilities began. Diplomatic staff would be held until prisoner exchanges could be arranged. Yoshikawa spent the evening of December 6th burning his notes and personal materials. He'd kept no written records beyond what was transmitted to Tokyo, but he destroyed everything that might link Morimura to intelligence activities. December 7th, 1941. 7:55 a.m. The first wave of Japanese aircraft appeared over Oahu. Yoshikawa heard the explosions from the consulate, felt the concussions rattle windows. He walked outside and looked south toward Pearl Harbor. Smoke columns rose into the morning sky. Everything he'd reported was accurate. The 8 battleships were exactly where he'd said they'd be. The aircraft were parked exactly as he'd described. Security was minimal, exactly as he'd predicted. His intelligence had enabled the attack to achieve complete surprise. Within hours, FBI agents surrounded the Japanese consulate. All staff, including Yoshikawa under his Morimura identity, were detained. They would spend 8 months in comfortable confinement at a hotel in Hot Springs, Virginia, before being exchanged for American diplomats held in Japan. American investigators interrogated the consulate staff repeatedly. They knew intelligence had come from Hawaii. Intercepted cables proved that. But they never identified Yoshikawa as the source. He maintained his Morimura cover perfectly. He was just a junior consular official who'd occasionally gone sightseeing. The FBI searched the consulate thoroughly. They found burned documents, evidence of code machines, diplomatic correspondence. But they found no spy equipment, no stolen classified materials, no evidence of traditional espionage. Because Yoshikawa hadn't conducted traditional espionage, he'd simply watched from public locations and reported what he saw. In August 1942, Yoshikawa and other Japanese diplomats sailed from New York aboard the exchange ship Gripsholm. During the long voyage, Yoshikawa remained silent about his intelligence work. Even among fellow Japanese, he maintained the Morimura fiction. He returned to Japan as the spy who'd enabled Pearl Harbor. Naval intelligence debriefed him extensively. His superiors praised his work. The attack's success had proven the value of his observations, but they also classified everything about his mission. Japan didn't want America to know how their intelligence had been gathered. Yoshikawa spent the rest of the war in various intelligence assignments, but never again in such a crucial role. After Japan's surrender, he returned to civilian life, working in business and maintaining silence about his espionage career. American intelligence didn't learn Yoshikawa's real identity until 1953, when a Japanese newspaper published an interview revealing his role. Even then, many Americans didn't believe one man with binoculars could have provided intelligence enabling such a devastating attack. Takeo Yoshikawa lived until 1993, dying at age 81. He gave occasional interviews about his Pearl Harbor intelligence work, always matter-of-factly, without drama or exaggeration. When American reporters asked how he'd avoided detection, Yoshikawa's answer was simple. I did nothing illegal. I just watched. This was technically accurate. Yoshikawa never broke into military facilities. He never bribed American personnel. He never recruited agents or stole documents. He conducted reconnaissance from public locations using tools anyone could purchase. Under American law in 1941, this wasn't espionage. It was observation. The failure wasn't Yoshikawa's cunning. It was American security complacency. Pearl Harbor operated as though invulnerable, as though the Pacific Fleet's home port was inherently safe simply because Hawaii was 4,000 miles from Japan. This complacency manifested in specific vulnerabilities Yoshikawa exploited. Tourist boats circled the harbor past Battleship Row. Public hillsides offered comprehensive views of fleet anchorages. Aircraft were parked wingtip to wingtip in open fields, visible from public roads. No one questioned tourists with binoculars or cameras. After Pearl Harbor, these vulnerabilities were immediately addressed. Harbor tours were banned. Observation points were closed. Photography restrictions were implemented. Aircraft were dispersed and protected. Security measures that should have been in place before the attack were implemented after 2,403 Americans died. American military intelligence studied Yoshikawa's operation extensively post-war. The conclusion was sobering. His intelligence collection would have been impossible to prevent without restricting public access to vast areas of Oahu. Such restrictions would have required acknowledging war was imminent, exactly the message American authorities wanted to avoid in 1941. The case exposed fundamental tensions in open societies conducting military operations. Democratic transparency and military security requirements conflict. Public roads and tourist attractions enabled Yoshikawa's reconnaissance. Eliminating those vulnerabilities would have required security measures incompatible with peacetime civilian life. Yoshikawa's success also revealed intelligence analysis failures. American codebreakers were intercepting Japanese diplomatic cables from Hawaii. They knew Tokyo was asking detailed questions about Pearl Harbor. But analysts didn't recognize these requests as attack preparation indicators. Admiral Husband Kimmel and General Walter Short, commanding officers in Hawaii, were relieved of command after Pearl Harbor and blamed for the attack's success. Both insisted they'd never received intelligence indicating imminent attack on Pearl Harbor specifically. They were correct. That intelligence existed, but it wasn't shared effectively. Yoshikawa's reporting should have been recognized as reconnaissance for attack. The increasing detail and urgency of Tokyo's questions, the specific focus on Sunday routines and torpedo net deployment, these were warning signs. But fragmented bureaucracies, intelligence compartmentalization, and analytical failures prevented the pieces from being assembled. In later interviews, Yoshikawa expressed no remorse. He'd been a naval officer conducting military reconnaissance against a potential enemy. This was his duty. The Americans should have stopped him, but they didn't. Their failure wasn't his responsibility. The effectiveness of Yoshikawa's operation influenced Japanese intelligence doctrine for the remainder of the war. His success proved that simple observation could produce valuable intelligence without risk. American intelligence learned opposite lessons. The failure to detect Yoshikawa led to increased counterintelligence emphasis, more aggressive surveillance of foreign diplomats, and greater restrictions on observation of military facilities. Modern security at Pearl Harbor and other U.S. military installations reflects lessons from Yoshikawa's operation. Restricted zones prevent observation from nearby vantage points. Photography regulations limit what can be legally captured. Access controls prevent casual tourist observation. Yoshikawa's legacy is paradoxical. He was the most successful intelligence officer in the Pearl Harbor attack. His reporting enabled the operation. But he achieved this without traditional espionage tradecraft, without violating laws, without even being detected. His success demonstrated that effective intelligence sometimes comes from simply paying attention to what's openly visible. When Yoshikawa died in 1993, his obituaries in American newspapers were surprisingly respectful. He was acknowledged as a skilled intelligence officer who'd performed his duty effectively. The anger about Pearl Harbor had faded over 50 years. What remained was professional recognition that Yoshikawa had identified and exploited genuine security vulnerabilities. Takeo Yoshikawa proved that intelligence work doesn't require elaborate deception or dramatic risks. Sometimes it requires only patience, systematic observation, and the discipline to report accurately what you see. He watched Pearl Harbor from tourist boats and public hillsides. He counted ships and aircraft anyone could have counted. He reported patterns anyone could have noticed. The Americans never caught him because they never realized he was there. And by the time they understood what had happened, 2,403 Americans were dead, the Pacific Fleet was crippled, and Takeo Yoshikawa was already on his way home to Japan.